Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Control or Be Controlled podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Today's guest is Wendy Garrido. She's a pickleball pioneer turned polyamory expert who now works with leaders who appear to have it all but still crave more freedom, pleasure, honesty, and aliveness in their businesses and relationships. Wendy, welcome to Control or Be Control.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the topics,
All right,
the concept.
Thank you so much, Wendy. So, I would like you to also introduce yourself to my audience.
Sure. Thank you for getting it started. I would start. Ever since I was 16 years old, either someone I know or someone close to me has passed away unexpectedly about every 3 years. And that's the best that I can attribute to why I feel like I've been so fiercely devoted to doing things my way instead of doing what was expected of me necessarily. So I went to University of Chicago. I have degrees in economics and psychology. I did a lot of research in the field, or I supported a lot of research in the field of judgment and decision making. And back then, it was really economics and psychology were these different fields where economists were acting like everybody was perfectly rational, and psychologists know that we're not. And so looking at that crossover of like, why don't we make rational decisions that are in our best interest and all of that? So when I left college, a lot of people either went on to become consultants at like McKinsey, or they became investment bankers with a six-figure starting salary. And there's just always been something in me that is not willing to compromise my time, my sense of aliveness, my freedom, and my quality time with people I love to chase the dollar. So it's kind of come around the other way. I've been doing what I love and then figuring out, well, how do I build a business around that? And that's how my ex-husband and I built the first ever like online full-time pickleball coaching business. And it seems like the pattern for me is find out about something that's really good, learn how to get really good at it over the next 7 years. And in that time, everybody else starts to find out about it. So I publish a book and then I start sharing my wisdom with the world. And so that's what we did in pickleball back in 2014. And then the last 8 years have really been my own personal exploration since I came out as polyamorous and our marriage ended. And it's been this exploration of how do I build relationships where I have deep emotional intimacy and closeness, where I also don't have to compromise on my freedom and autonomy and personal sovereignty. And it hasn't always been easy, but I have incredible relationships in my life that are emotionally intimate, sexually intimate, and nobody thinks that they have any control or ownership over me and my choices and what I do. And they're incredibly supportive of me doing what feels right to me.
All right, thank you so much, Wendy, for that wonderful introduction. So, Wendy, let's get into the show. You say you can't be betrayed by someone else if you haven't betrayed yourself first. Tell us what self-betrayal actually look like in a relationship, and why do most people never recognize it in the moment it is happening?
Well, I'll start with your second question. The reason that we don't notice that we're compromising on ourselves in these ways is because we've kind of been taught that that's what love means, that love means compromising, that love means doing something even if you don't feel comfortable or safe in it, that love means doing things for people even if you don't want to. And in the way that I define love, is that it means accepting people for who they are and supporting them in becoming who they want to be, not putting pressure on them to be who we want them to be. And so when it comes to this sense, we feel betrayed by somebody, and maybe it's like an actual, like they cheated, but it also, we can certainly feel devastated and betrayed by people making decisions that are far smaller than that type of thing, but they don't feel smaller to us. But what I have found is that as we move into emotional or physical closeness with somebody, we find these edges of, I call it the verge of vulnerability. And so you're going through your everyday life, you're not having this closeness that brings up these feelings of vulnerability in you. But you find the special person, you get to that point. Our culture teaches you to say, I mean, we celebrate the fact that like you push through that vulnerability because you tell number one, the person loves you. You know that they don't ever want to hurt you, and they're reassuring you of this. And so we push through the feeling and we decide to do it anyway. And in the moment and for a while afterwards, we're glad. It feels like it brings us closer together because we have been, we've asked this other person to help us feel safe, and they have. But the problem happens down the road when neither of us realized the implicit expectations that decision came with. And so eventually, inevitably, the other person is going to want or need to do something to care for themselves or to be true to themselves that doesn't feel great to us. And it's at that point that then we will feel devastated and betrayed because we were like, hey, I trusted you and I thought you weren't going to hurt me. And look, now you're hurting me, even if it's like 3 months or a year down the road. So I think of that sense, that verge of vulnerability now, I take it as it's time to stop, like to pause what I'm doing and explore those feelings. The gift and the thing to celebrate for me in those moments of relationship, it's not celebrating going past those feelings, but it's celebrating being able to find those feelings at all so that we can then do the inner work and excavation to better understand them and to help heal ourselves and grow. And then we can come back and maybe we do that exact same thing, but it doesn't feel as vulnerable. And it's just, I've learned this the hard way through breakups that because I'm poly, I've had more opportunity and iteration to kind of go through relationships and collect data about it. And I just realized, what is it that is so devastating that has me sobbing on the ground in the parking lot one time? Where was the moment that I made that decision? And I don't even remember exactly how I figured that part out. But now that I've had that as my operating system, I've had in my more recent relationships, I'm really proud of the ways that I have both taken care of myself and been able to support my partners in doing what feels right to them and accepting who and how they are without me feeling so devastated. At the core, to me, it's really about how do we keep our hearts open without leaving it unprotected.
All right. Thank you so much, Wendy. So most people think if only my partner loved me, they would probably do what they wanted or what they wish their partner would do. What you say is almost never about a lack of love. What is it actually about?
Yeah, I think it can be two things. I call it delusional devotion in one way, where we love someone so much or they love us so much that we want to be able to give them what they want. and so sorry, my computer went to sleep for a second. I don't know why. Sorry, I think it must be because I'm not in Zoom. So, let me get my thoughts back. Can you remind me where I was? I haven't recorded in Riverside before.
All right. I said you were talking about when somebody wants to probably do something for their partner. That's where you were. So I don't know if you want me to repeat the question again.
Sure.
Okay. Most people think if only my partner loved me, they would do probably what they wanted the partner or their partner to do for them. But you say it's almost never about a lack of love. What is it actually about?
Well, to me, it's about following our sense of aliveness and being true to ourself. So just because they are choosing to do something that doesn't feel good to you, in close relationships, I've never seen it be that it's actually because the person doesn't love you. They usually love you very deeply. But as separate humans with separate bodies and souls and life experiences, we're not always going to be able to line up and want the same thing at the same time for ourselves, let alone for each other. So yeah, I think that's about all I have on that one.
All right, Wendy, thank you so much. So, Wendy, you coined the term invisible codependence. How is that different from traditional codependency? And why does it so often look and feel like love?
I think of traditional codependency is a more, I would say, extreme version of what I call invisible codependence. And the way that I would compare it is it's sort of like with food and nutrition. Like there could be somebody who is having a disordered eating and really is struggling with that. Or there could be kind of the mainstream way that most of us eat, but it's really not ideal or optimal for our health and well-being. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's like the opportunity of really optimizing our diet and doing our blood tests and understanding what does our body need for nourishment and giving it that. And so similarly, I think that traditional codependency, it kind of compares it to like the eating disorder end of things, where it's like, okay, this has created really huge problems in your life. But invisible codependence is more pervasive than that, in the same way that kind of the standard diet isn't ideal, that our culture has taught us that love means doing these things. But it's not actually giving us what we need. And when we can identify where is that codependence showing up in our lives at a more nuanced level, just like if we're trying to go for optimal eating, we're doing those blood tests. If we're looking at where's our ideal, like how do we get to our ideal state of relationship and connection to ourself, then we use finer measures to understand what is coming up for us and why.
Okay, Wendy. You describe in specific moments in every relationship where people make a decision that feels fine at the time, but leads to heartbreak 3, 6, or 12 months later. Can you talk about that moment and how do people learn to catch it?
Yeah, this is kind of continues what I was talking about the sense of betrayal. But the way that I recognize those moments in time is really by paying attention to the signals that my body is giving me. And because our bodies are tracking like what safety feels like and what circumstances contribute to our sense of safety. And I've just been amazed at how when I listen to the things that my body is saying yes to or no to, that really serves me. And so I think of a a yes in my body. Like it usually feels, I feel excited, it feels expansive, it feels effervescent in my body. But when it's a no, it's often a constriction in my gut or like holding my breath or this feeling of contraction and wanting to back away. And so it's going to be different for everybody. One way you can test it is just by imagining or noticing when you're in particular situations where it's really clear, like you definitely don't want to do that. Well, then pay attention. What does that feel like in your body? Because that will help you recognize it then next time you're in a situation where it's really not feeling good to you. You'll be like, okay, this is the thing that tells me that I need to stop and pause. So how do I build that space into what I'm doing so that I can do that and better listen and figure out what's going on here that I haven't understood yet. There's often when I work with people, I'm helping them identify an unexpressed truth, and our bodies are aware of these truths, but when our minds are not.
All right, Wendy, thank you so much. So moving on, what is your 1-2 rule about making requests? And why don't more people follow it naturally?
So I call it the 1-2 rule of requests. And it's this: if you make a request to someone and they say yes, you've asked them once, and then remind them maybe twice if necessary, assuming that they say that they want to do it. You ask, they say yes. If they don't, you remind them twice. And after that, if they can't do it by that point, then it means that either they can't do it or they don't want to do it. And at that point, it's time to look at, okay, again, in terms of how I approach love is accepting people for who they are. And so this person, they've said that they want to do this thing, but they're not showing up to do that. So what's the minimum that I need to change here? I call it a minimum viable boundary in order to care for myself. So when we think of like a business context, like I once had a video editor who his graphics were great, but I would get the video and he wasn't properly bleeping out the swear words. And so I've asked once. I didn't even think I should have to ask a video editor, but I did ask once. I reminded him twice. And at that point, I mean, very few people are going to continue reminding a video editor to do this thing. You're going to accept how they are, and you're going to either hire somebody else or take it back and do it yourself, or or move on. But in our personal lives, how often do we ask once and remind 40 times or 400 times? And it's usually because it's easier to ask the other person to change than to be willing to face the feelings and take the actions that are required for us to change.
Okay, Wendy, thank you so much for breaking that down about the 1-2 rule of making a request. So you work with people in both polyamorous and monogamous relationships using the same exact framework, right?
Yeah.
So why then don't you actually work with couples?
I am fiercely devoted to honoring our own inner truth and aliveness. Like I was saying before, inevitably there are times when our path is going to diverge from the other person's, no matter how much we love them. And I really got clear in this at one time when I was listening to a podcast where the therapist, and this was like one of the top podcasts anywhere, the therapist said that he treats the couple like the couple is the unit that he treats. And to me, that means that we're putting the needs of the couple above the needs of the individuals in a lot of cases. And so I am committed to how do we build relationships that don't ask us to compromise on who we are. And in order to do that, you have to start by being true to yourself. So it's not as though if I'm working with one person that their partner couldn't also work with me separately, but I'm here to help each of them develop their own skills rather than for me to supplement the skills that they don't have by stepping in and working with them together. And for better or for worse, my goal is not to maintain the relationship. My goal is to help each of them step into more authenticity, freedom, and aliveness than they have ever before, and then to find out what their relationship can look like when they're both doing that.
Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. So, after a divorce, a decade of polyamory, and watching so many clients navigate breakups, what do you know about heartbreak now that you wish you didn't know at the beginning?
Oh, let's see. Well, I don't think that I really understood how much control, appropriately for our topic, how much control we have over controlling that degree of risk. That most people, it's either they are distancing themselves and they won't let themselves get intimate or close to anybody because they're so afraid of getting hurt. Or there's the people who are like, we're diving in and we're building connection and then we're feeling heartbroken. And it's also heartbroken to be so isolated and afraid of connecting with anyone because you're afraid of getting hurt, that by itself is also heartbreaking. So either of those can create heartbreak, but I didn't realize that there's a way that I can, if I slow down and listen to my body and be intentional, I can build that connection without doing it in a way that is going to hurt me. I think that we think that heartbreak is either it's either just bad luck or it's something out of our control, or we blame our partner for it because they did this or they didn't do that. And it's both empowering. I mean, it's a little to take responsibility for the fact that you have some say over it. That's one of the good and bad things about being polyamorous, is that when you're monogamous, it's easy to blame something on your partner. But when you're polyamorous and the same situation is coming up for you with 3 different partners, you have to look at what's the commonality here.
All right. Thank you so much, Wendy. So you work with 6 and 7-figure business owners on their relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us the connection between how someone shows up in love and how they show up in business?
Well, there's 2 ways that they will relate generally, and both of them are helpful and give us more information. Either you're really good at something in one domain, but you're not good at it in the other domain, and it's a challenge for you. Or you're either good at in both or you're struggling in both domains, right? And so particularly in those cases where, let's say you're great at setting boundaries with your clients, but you are really having a hard time setting boundaries with your partner or your kids, it's like the Venn diagram that lets us say, okay, well, what, in this case, there's not overlap between these 2 circles. Like, you can do it here and you can't do it there. So what is it that's different about this circle for you? What is inside this circle here that isn't inside the other circle over here? And that helps us zero in on, often it's something related to our past. It could be that that they're like a way that their parents showed up, and like at home, they're sort of operating the way that they did with their mom, but at work, they're operating the way that they did with their dad. It gives us more insight. And then similarly, if it's something that you're struggling in both domains, it's like, okay, well, so you have a hard time setting boundaries at home. Wow. And in your business, where it's a matter of like hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, you're also struggling with it over here. So that tells us that it's not about a lack of motivation, right? Or it just gives us more data when we can compare both domains.
All right. And Wendy, thank you so much. So here is my final question for you. Is there one question you wish I would have asked you that I did not ask you?
Oh, there's so many questions. I mean, it could have been, could we talk for an hour? It could have been, there's so many questions. Let me think. I think I have something I call secondary frustration. So when we have a feeling, let's say that a launch didn't go as you wished that it would, or you had a breakup 4 months ago and you're still feeling sad about it, right? Like those are the primary feelings. You're frustrated or you're upset about the launch, you're sad about the breakup. That's pretty common. But what I call secondary frustration is when we start to be frustrated with ourselves for having those feelings. So, your launch didn't go well, but now you're frustrated with yourself that you can't just accept it and move on. Or you're sad about your relationship, but now you're putting pressure on yourself and telling yourself you should just be able to get over it. It took me a long time to realize that in those situations, it's really almost always an opportunity for me to step into a new level of identity. And so I like to ask myself in those situations, who am I not allowing myself to be? Because it's like the glimmer of who we can become in the future, that once we are that person, we won't be frustrated with these feelings anymore. But we're not quite there. So I think paying attention to when you feel that secondary frustration come up and what areas of your life it is in, and instead of just thinking like it's pointless and you suck because you feel that way, to be like, wow, this is actually really good insight here. If I feel frustrated with how I'm feeling, there must be something really good and big on the other side of it for me to learn. So I guess that's the answer to the question that you would have asked me. But there you have it.
Thank you so much. I always ask my guests a particular question because I want to make sure I was able to touch whatever I needed to touch on the show and make sure I provide the highest amount of value I needed to provide for my audience. So before you go, Wendy, if there's one thing you wish every listener would take away from this conversation, what would you want that to be?
You always have more control than you think you do. You always have more options than you can see. And that's something else really profound that I can't think of right now. But there's so many things, but really just those two things are huge. And a lot of the work that I do is helping people. I have what I call a 3-2-1 guarantee, where when we talk, I guarantee that I will ask you 3 questions that you have never been asked before. We'll come up with 2 possibilities that you've never considered before. And I'll help you come up with one practical next step in the direction of your heart's calling that actually feels good and doable for you.
All right, Wendy, thank you so much for coming to Control or Be Controlled. Thank you for sharing your perspective and your insights with me and my audience. I really appreciate you taking your time breaking down relationship and business together. So, how can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram at Wendy Love Garrido, WendyLoveGarrido. My website is wendygarrido.com. And I just released I call it a mini book on Amazon. It's 8,000 words. It's a quick read, but it's called The Sexual Sovereignty Bible. And it's really created to give a vision for if we are all committed to not being controlled and not controlling other people, how do we build emotionally, physically intimate relationships and a society of people built on honoring our sovereignty? So that's like $2.99. You can get the ebook on Amazon, and that's a great starting point.
All right, thank you so much once again. I really appreciate you once again for coming, and I'm sure Those who want to reach out to you, they will definitely reach out to you and know more about what
Thank
you do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Wendy, so don't forget to mark episode as complete and leave me a review about the show on Podmatch.
Thank you so much.